Hello, investors. It's been another good positive month. We've again outperformed the market. But this month, I'm not going to really talk to you about markets and trends and cycles because this month was a very special month for me. You all know Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala passed away, and he was a mentor for me as far as the markets go. Today, what I'm going to share with you is what I have learned from him. You have seen and read a lot of tributes paid to the great man, and everyone has said different things, and I find that interesting because he was a man with such a large footprint. No single person can cover his life in totality. So what I am going to really tell you about is the little influence that he had on my life. He is a very, very significant market investor. You all know about him, but he also touched many lives in the journey. A lot of people in rare owe their learnings and earnings to him, and I am one of those beneficiaries. So one thing that I really learned from Rakesh ji, which was very, very unique, was that he was a great judge of talent. He was a good judge of people. In fact, most people look at his investments and talk about the companies, the businesses. More than all this, I felt Rakesh ji bet on people, on the management behind it. And that was really where his outsized winners are. Let's take the case of his most popular investment, Titan, right? So when I go back and I look at what is it that Rakesh ji saw in the early 2000s that made him take such a large bet in Titan. You go and see the balance sheet, you go and see the business, there was nothing much in it. So I would keep asking Rakesh ji, what is it? What is it that you saw in Titan that made you take such a big bet? And he told me that what mattered to him was ultimately the management at Titan. He went to Bangalore to visit, and at that stage the CEO was somebody called Xerxes Desai. He's saying, when I saw the organization, the young crowd, the enthusiasm, it became very clear to me that the energy they have, they will make something wonderful out of it. And in 2003, Titan had a new CEO, Bhaskar Bhatt joined, and he and Rakesh ji hit it off very well. Ultimately, I think that Titan, as much as it was a bet on the watch business becoming a successful jewelry business, it was on Bhaskar Bhatt's ability to make that transition. And the journey is not linear. There were ups and downs. At times, people came out with a lot of sell reports, I remember. But Rakesh ji's belief in the management, in their ability to deliver, is really what led him through the ups and downs. And that was really what created those outsized returns. So something that I learned very, very strongly, or what I believe in, is that ultimately it is the people that deliver. We can keep analyzing balance sheets, we can keep looking at businesses, but the world is uncertain. And it is managements that are good, which are quality managements, can navigate. I mean, we've had COVID. Who could ever predict that? We had a whole commodity boom thanks to Russia, Ukraine. Who could predict that? It is just that managements and people that are able to navigate through them successfully are the companies you should bet on. So that's why I learned through this experience that bet on quality. Bet on quality, not just the business, not just the balance sheet, but bet on quality managements and people, because ultimately they are the big wealth creators. The second thing that I learned from Rakesh ji was the fact that, he's termed as a trader investor. Most people like to just call themselves investors. But he had no qualms about saying that he focuses on markets. And in fact, the markets speak to him. And this was his uniqueness. Most people put themselves as investors. It's a very intellectual thing to talk about, Mark, about being an investor. Most people look down upon traders, but there is a huge group of them. Rakesh ji was able to actually combine both of them. And this is really what attracted me to him in 2003 when I first met him. Because ultimately there are very few people in the market who are able to combine these two skills. And from him, I really learned this whole art of being able to be in, of course, fundamentally good companies, because ultimately they drive profitability and prices, but to also respect Mr. Market. Mr. Market has a mind of its own. And it is very important that we are humble enough to listen to Mr. Market. And that is something which, is very intrinsic to my thought process and the way I invest, thanks to my experience and spending time with him. The third thing that I really learned was, of course, not a very pleasant experience, was about being humble. A very large investment which was done at the PE stage was in a company called A to Z. He navigated the company towards an IPO, but post IPO, the stock really came off. And it was very, very painful for him. Obviously there was loss of money, losses were there, but also the reputation damage was there. But what I saw him do was that he navigated this fall very courageously. And he was able to exit his position, though very late because it was a very large position. But it gave me an understanding that nobody is perfect in this market. Here is one of the most successful investors who's picked so many great stocks, can also have his share of failures. And the way he humbly accepted his mistake, exited his position, and recovered and moved on was a very big learning. For me, it became very important, and it is a part of my process, the ability to sell, the ability to cut losses. Because sooner or later in our life, in investment career, we are going to land up with some bad bets. And for all the wealth he had, for all the intellect he had, he was humble enough to cut his position and exit. And exiting losing positions is something which I personally think, I hope in my life I never falter, because it is very scary and very painful when these happen. And unfortunately, they happen very often in this market. So this is something which I learned from him. And lastly, what I'd like to share with you is that, he lived life at his terms. In fact, there's something people take away from all walks of life, is that here is a man who lived true to himself, lived life at his own terms. So he never cloned anybody. People said, Mr. Jhunjhunwala is India's Warren Buffett. I think that's not true. Even he didn't believe in it. His investment style, his lifestyle, the way he managed his money was so different from Warren Buffett. He never actually copied anybody. He built his own style. So he was not the Warren Buffett of India. He was the Rakesh Jhunjhunwala of India. And this ability to find your own strength, build on it, and create a style is something which has left an impact. Because just as you all know that I combine fundamentals and technicals, there are hardly any people who do that. In fact, it's not considered very, very, up there. But the fact is that you have to realize your own strengths, create your own styles, and ultimately in the long run, this is what creates a lot of wealth. Cloning and copying never has created big wealth in the market. And seeing him work on his terms with conviction in his thought process gives me also the faith and belief to ultimately go out and carve my process, to know my strengths and build an investing and trading style which is unique to me. I can go on and on. There are so many things that I've learned from him. But for today, I think these are the 4 major influences of a good person, great person who's had a lot of impact. And I wish him a lot of peace in his afterlife. Thank you.